Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we have with us Dr. C Rangarajan, Chairman of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, who will decode for us the bigger picture emerging from the budget on India's macroeconomy. Welcome to our show, Dr. Rangarajan.
Thank you.
The budget has generally generated optimism in regard to fiscal correction and a higher GDP growth in the coming fiscal. Now, what do you think of these two variables over the next 6 months? How would they behave?
I think the budget is very well conceived. It is both responsible and forward-looking. It has contained the fiscal deficit in the current year, and it has also promised to bring down the fiscal deficit next year. These are steps which are necessary from the point of view of fiscal consolidation and prudence. But at the same time, the budget has provided enough incentives for investment and growth. And therefore, I believe that the full impact of the various measures taken since September, as well as the measures announced in the budget, will be felt during the next fiscal. And it is my view that the rate of growth of the economy in the next fiscal will be around 6.5%, which is what is implicit in the budget as well.
So the 6.5% GDP growth assumption, some people are raising doubts over it. What is the basis, according to you, for the economy to really bounce back by over a percentage in the next 6-7 months?
In the current year,
Yeah.
The rate of growth of the economy will be a little above 5%.
So that means you'll have a bounce back of nearly
And therefore,
1.5%.
I expect that the rate of growth next year could be about 1 to 1.5% higher than the current year. Because we need to look at the impact on investment and therefore on growth. Investment decisions take time. But we have been taking a number of measures since September, and this has been again re-emphasized by the budget by providing certain very specific measures to stimulate investment.
Investments.
And also the point that I have been making, and you have also been making, is that our savings rate and investment rate continue to remain high, and therefore under normal circumstances, it should give us a much higher rate of growth than what we have seen in the last few years. Yeah. This is primarily because the investment projects have not been completed, even though investment has been made to some extent. Therefore, I expect during the course of the next fiscal, many of the impediments that have come in the way of the completion of the projects will be removed, and therefore we will see the full benefits of the investment that has been made in the last 2 years, and that will be made in the coming year. So this is what makes me optimistic about the economy growing at about 6.5% in the next fiscal.
Sure. So you are assuming that the quick bounce back could be on account of investments made where output has not fructified for various reasons, right?
Yes, I think the incremental capital output ratio,
Yeah.
Which is of course the residual, which is a derived number, has shot up in the last 2 years. But if it settles down to the more normal level of 4:1, a 30 to 32% investment rate should certainly give us about 8%. But there have been many factors which have come in the way of the completion of projects. Some of them are purely managerial and procedural. Some of them because of policy decisions and so on.
Yeah.
But a conscious effort has been made, such as the constitution of the Cabinet Committee on Investments,
yeah.
which is intended to clear the obstacles and impediments that come in the way of a speedy implementation of projects. I think this is a critical and key factor that will contribute to the pickup in investment and therefore the pickup in growth.
Do you also have a sense that that political opposition to various initiatives, even normal regular project clearances which existed until about 6-7 months ago, seems to have waned, and even within the legislature, there seems to be a greater cooperation in regard to pushing for not just new reforms, but pushing for old reforms which were pending. Now, do you get a sense that that itself will lead to this GDP bounce back in terms of projects cleared, other impediments cleared?
Well, there has been a considerable amount of consensus in this country on the content of reforms. Different governments have pursued more or less similar measures. For various reasons, there have been differences of opinion in terms of emphasis, in terms of timing. But I believe that there is a high degree of consensus that prevails in the country regarding the nature of the reforms. Certainly on removing the impediments to investment, on speedy completion of projects, there can be no difference of opinion. I think we really have to act. Yeah. We cannot allow huge amounts of investment being made and not making it fully effective. That is not in the interest of anyone.
Are you satisfied, sir, with the pace of the new cabinet committee clearing some of these impediments over the last 3 months?
Well, they have just started, but certainly at some higher level, that is at the policy level, they have attempted to clear certain impediments. But I think going forward, I see more and more projects getting cleared in a shorter time. And therefore, action being initiated. I certainly think, for example, which I had emphasized in an earlier interview you had with me, that the completion of some of the major projects in the area of power, roads and railways will push the economy forward. Yeah. And you see that reflected in the railway budget, you see it reflected in the general budget, and therefore...
and some new environment clearances have come, which were not forthcoming 6 months ago. Is there also a positive development?
I think that the issues that have been raised related to land acquisition, related to environment and so on. But there is a certain understanding now that we need to balance different objectives. And it is not as if environmental considerations are totally irrelevant. I think the country cannot afford to land itself in a situation in which there is a deterioration in the environment.
The cost of environment is so high.
Yeah, but at the same time, we really need to look at the importance of growth. A balanced approach to these measures is required.
Sure. We'll take a small break here. Please don't go and stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Dr. C Rangarajan on the prospects for the Indian economy in the financial year ahead. So you were talking about the criticality of various projects, investments in the pipeline which need to be cleared, and these need to be done in a very short period because the upturn in GDP assumed in the budget is based on these clearances. So, this, would you say that this becomes, in some sense, one of the most critical aspects of both the budget and of administration in the 6-7 months ahead?
I believe so, because there is an emphasis on getting projects cleared and also speedy implementation of projects. As you know, the impact on growth in a particular year is due to the projects not only initiated in that year but also initiated in the previous year. And now that several projects have been initiated in the past 2 years but have not moved fast enough, now if they are moved fast, then you will get the immediate benefit of those projects initiated a few years ago but which have lagged behind.
So now coming to some of the other measures which could also raise the animal spirits or provide impetus to growth is obviously the RBI's action in the coming weeks. Do you think the RBI governor last week said that he was satisfied with the fiscal correction which has happened in 2012-13, and he also finds the fiscal numbers credible for the coming year. Now, do we read into this possible interest rate cut, which is also needed for growth?
Well, interest rate is an important factor as far as investment decisions are concerned. Even if it does not influence the level of investment, it certainly influences the timing of investment. Therefore, in that sense, interest rate is important. At the same time, investment is a function of many other factors in the economy. Yeah. For example, growth itself is important for, or is a stimulant for investment. That is what we used to call earlier the acceleration principle. That is, investment in any time period is dependent upon the increase in the output in the previous two periods. Yeah. Therefore, as growth picks up, also investment will come in. So I will, and as I said, that animal spirits, or as we call them sometimes, can also be stimulated or can also be sustained if certain actions which are taken which show stability in the system, which show a commitment to growth. All of this are in place now. In my view, that a series of measures have been taken which can and which has improved the investment climate, the word climate used in a very, very broad sense.
And the RBI could, you said, add to...
And as far as the RBI is concerned, there are two major objectives as far as the central bank is concerned. One is growth and the other is containing inflation. Now, inflation, of course, still remains at a high level, but the monetary authorities look at much more closely that element of inflation which is probably under its control, which is what is called the non-food manufacturing inflation, which is treated as a reflection of demand pressures in the system. Since it has come down below 4%, I believe that the monetary authorities have
some room to
have now a greater space
to ease
to act in that direction.
So we've had this this combination of growth stagnating and inflation remaining stubbornly high. This has led to many economists talking about stagflationary tendencies. Now, in one of your recent papers, the term has been used, stagflationary tendency, of course, in the context of the global economy. Do you think India is also facing a stagflationary situation where growth is stagnant and inflation remains high?
No, I think the classic definition of stagflation is a situation in which when growth is almost zero and inflation remains high. It is in that particular context the term has been used.
Okay.
Therefore,
you're saying that we
do not have that situation. I think the article to which you refer talked primarily about the developed and advanced economies. And when we talk of stagflationary tendencies, one is referring to a fact where inflation remains high when growth is slowing. In the advanced economies, when growth has slowed, inflation has also remained low.
Okay.
But in many of the developing economies, including China, when growth slowed down, inflation has not necessarily come down, inflation has remained high. Therefore, I would say the Indian situation does not correspond to the stagflation.
The classic stagflation definition doesn't correspond.
It doesn't correspond to it. We have had a slowdown in growth, but that is not stagnation.
And you're saying that it's reversing?
And as I mentioned at the beginning, I believe that we are still growing between 5 and 6%. And I expect the Indian economy to pick up further during the next year when we may see a growth rate of around 6.5%. And in the meanwhile, I also expect that inflation to moderate a little bit. Therefore, I think the word or the phrase stagflation should not be used in the Indian context in that sense.
Okay. So primarily you're saying that the direction of India's growth is currently upward and direction of inflation is possibly downward, so therefore it doesn't fit into the stagflation definition.
I think if you are a little forward looking, you will see that growth will pick up after having had 2 years of low growth, and inflation will also come down, and this will, in my opinion, pave the way for a further pickup in the growth in the year after that.
So, does the deceleration, sharp deceleration in consumption growth, does that worry you? Because for the first time, we are seeing consumption in several sectors at growth rates at 7-8 year lows.
Well, it is all a reflection of the same phenomenon. After all, when growth slows down, then consumption demand also goes down, because consumption is very much a function of income.
No, I am saying this because even after the 2008 global crisis, consumption kept up. In 2009 it kept up, 2010 consumption growth was fairly high. It's only now that it has really come down very sharply.
In some sense, as you know, that consumption is a function of what many people call permanent income, in the sense that when incomes have remained high, even at that time, people look at the past and they still continue to spend on consumption expenditure because of the high level income of the previous period. But when growth slows down over a period of 2 years, then consumption expenditure also begins to fall. Okay. So this is what we used to call the permanent income hypothesis.
Okay, okay. So we'll take a small break here. Please don't go away and keep watching RSTV. Welcome back to State of the Economy. We are having a conversation with Dr. C Rangarajan, Chairman of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council. So coming back to the budget, the one thing that really puzzles me is you've had industrial production virtually down to less than 1% or less than 1.5%, yet excise duty is growing at 10%. How do you reconcile these two seemingly odd figures?
Well, it all depends upon the composition. I mean, because the excise duty is also levied at different rates on different commodities, and therefore it will depend upon the composition of the expenditure. But what we are also saying is that
but overall, shouldn't excise duty mirror industrial production growth? Excise duty growth.
It should, but in the past also we have seen that when income picked up very sharply, the excise duty did not also grow that fast. So that direct correlation is not very much there. But yes, theoretically, one should see that as income grows and people spend more on commodities, the excise duty should go up. But what is really happening is a very sharp increase in the service tax as we expand
that will be adding to the
as we expand the scope of the service tax. I think
the widening base effect is
right. The widening of the base is happening.
So, for the same reason, would you argue that the 19% revenue growth shown in the budget would seem reasonable, because there are many more services which would come into the tax net?
I think if you compare the rate of growth last year or in the current year and the rate of growth projected for next year, they are very close. In fact, even in a year in which we are supposed to have grown only about 5 or a little above 5%.
We've had a good recent revenue growth.
We have had a good revenue increase. And what we are projecting is only a shade higher than what has actually happened in the current year. Therefore, I think it is a reasonable assumption, and I think we will be able to get it.
So, one more question that is on people's mind is how, in this phase of fiscal correction and growth recovery, how would new schemes like the food security bill impact both growth and expenditure? Because we are in a phase where we are trying to correct excess expenditure, really excessive spending which happened after the 2008 global meltdown, which all governments did in the world. And now all governments in the world are trying to reduce their expenditure. Now in this phase, we are getting new schemes which probably have the potential to increase.
Well, you see, what we need
Although
to
the
look,
budget only provides for 10,000 crore, I just want a sense from you as to whether 10,000 crore is enough, or will more come during the middle of the year or next year?
what is really needed is to look at the total quantum of subsidies. The very fact that the budget has provided for fiscal correction and takes the fiscal deficit down to 4.8% of the GDP next year means that they have looked at the overall revenues and expenditures. Now, subsidies is one part of the expenditures. And within subsidies, there are different components. Now, a view can be taken that subsidies on food security are paramount. And therefore, while containing the overall subsidies to a particular proportion of GDP or a particular proportion of the expenditure, we can fully provide for the subsidies for relating to food security and cut the other subsidies.
What you're saying that maybe the diesel price correction would release maybe some 60-70,000 crore over the next 18 months, and some of that could shift to food.
Right. I think what is really needed is to ensure that the subsidies on other accounts is substantially reduced in order to make up for the increase in the subsidies for food security.
And which are those other accounts, according to you? You must have done.
I think quite clearly petroleum subsidies is one area.
That is the elephant in the room which needs to be tamed.
And then there is the fertilizer subsidies also. I think at some particular point we really need to act on that also. Therefore, these are the two major elements. Therefore, even on food security for the next year, it all depends upon when and at what point the new bill will come into operation. But even if that bill or the act demands more subsidies, we could provide for them, but at the same time cut the other subsidies.
So roughly, if you take the petroleum subsidies and fertilizer subsidies together, they total to about possibly $40 billion. If you take about 2 lakh crores.
Right, yes, right? Maybe.
Roughly?
Right, yes.
Now, realistically, how much can you bring this down to? This petroleum price correction is happening, and if you attack fertilizer subsidy also, can this be brought down to say by 50%?
No, I'm saying that is a calculation that you have to make over the long period. But as far as the current next year is concerned, the budget has provided for certain subsidies under fertilizer and under petroleum, and has also provided under the food security. The question is that whether the additional 10,000 crores provided for will be adequate. All that I am saying is that if the need for subsidy under the food security bill goes beyond the 10,000 crore, to that extent you reduce the fertilizer or the petroleum subsidies which have been provided for.
Okay, so
it is only the marginal adjustment that I am talking about.
You're talking about, okay. No, I was talking more about a 3-year, over the next 3 years, what could be the kind of adjustment that...
Well, it all depends upon the way in which revenues increase. After all, there is also a function of the total quantum of revenue. And therefore, if, and I expect that it will happen, that we pick up growth in the subsequent years to 7 to 8 and more, then obviously the revenue kitty will also grow. So all that we really need to do is to keep, for example, the total quantum of subsidies to less than 2% of the GDP. It is now about 2% of the GDP. Earlier on, it was indicated that we could move to a level at which it is 1.6% of the GDP.
We could move,
that is the level at which the level towards which we should move as far as correction is concerned.
Okay. And sir, during this period, over the say next 1 year, how much do you think will direct benefit transfer scheme and such schemes which the government has come up with would help in reducing expenditure? What is your sense?
My sense is that in the initial stage, the direct cash transfer system will really eliminate the mistakes or the errors of commission and omission. Because as of now, the schemes towards which we have moved are cash transfers even now, but through a different mechanism.
You're just trying to make it more efficient.
We are making it more efficient because whether it is scholarships or whether it is the transfer of pension, all of these are in some sense cash transfers. But the present mechanism that we are following is inefficient. Therefore, my understanding is that this the cash transfer system that we are now introducing will make this system more perfect, eliminate errors of commission and omission.
So finally, if you are RBI governor, what sort of interest rate cut would you implement at this stage?
No, I think this is not a question that you should ask of an ex-governor. I think all that I said, which I mentioned earlier, is that there is scope in view of the fact that fiscal consolidation is proceeding along the desired lines.
And it's credible.
Growth needs to pick up. And there is also an indication that the non-food manufacturing inflation is at a comfortable level. It is below 4%. All these are favorable factors for the Reserve Bank of India to act in the direction of easing.
Thank you, sir, for talking to us. That's all we have in this episode of State of the Economy. We'll come back with another edition soon. Thanks for watching.